Welcome back to Weekday. I'm Suzanne Guyette. A lot of us dream about getting away from civilization for a while, but Michael Modzelewski actually did it. He spent 18 months in a wilderness area called the Inside Passage, and that is the name of his new book. We're very happy to welcome Michael to Weekday to hear about some of his adventures. Welcome, Michael.
All right, thank you.
First of all, tell us where the Inside Passage is exactly.
It refers to a geographical area that's 900 miles in length, extending from Puget Sound, Washington, all the way up to Glacier Bay, Alaska.
Okay, now before you left to go on this wilderness experience, you had a very different kind of life. Tell us what you were doing. I
was a ski bum in Aspen, Colorado. And Aspen, for anybody that's been there, is very, very civilized. There's about 90 restaurants and 80 bars in this 4-by-4 mile town. And one night I went to see a movie, and oftentimes a movie or a book is pivotal to changing our lives. And the movie was Jeremiah Johnson, starring Robert Redford. And I came out of the theater wondering if, in the 20th century, a young man could go into the wilderness and live the life of a mountain man, just as he had done, or the character had done, in the 19th century, about the 1860s. So I wondered if there was a swatch of wilderness left on Earth where a neophyte or a rookie could go learn from the Indians and learn from the land itself. And then there's a saying, be careful what you ask for, you just might get it. 3 months later, I was on the island. All
right. You are on the island, or were on the island, because of a man named Will Maloff. Tell us about Will and how you met him.
I met Will through sort of an emissary, a girlfriend that I had met in Aspen, who lived in Vancouver. I went up to visit her, and through Genevieve, I met Will. And I call him a human brontosaurus. He's sort of the guy that went extinct a long time ago. He was a chiropractor, blacksmith. He had a blacksmith shop. He was also a hypnotist and a healer as well. So a lot of talents rolled into one. Okay, now he lived in a place called Swanson Island, and this is where you went to spend some time with him. It's amazing that you obviously hit it off with him immediately for him to trust you enough to say, come on and be on the island. Did that surprise you that he was willing to let you try this? Well, I think he sensed something in me that I was open for the experience, and even though I was raw, I had done some camping before, I think he sensed that I probably would be a quick study and that I could pick up a lot of the skills pretty fast. And when we first met, we were having Chinese dinner with Will, Genevieve, and myself, and we totally ignored Genevieve, and we were talking about our outdoor experiences. I cracked open my fortune cookie at the end, and it said, you were going on a journey to an exotic land. Okay. So who could resist? 2 days later, I jumped on the ferry and found the island. Tell us about the house you lived in on Swanson Island. Very primitive, about 12 by 20 feet. Wood-burning stove to cook on, and that was also your heat source. Kerosene lamps for light, and an outhouse about 20 paces away that seemed 20 miles during the wintertime. So very, very primitive. When you describe the place, I think what struck me the most is you talk about the scale of it, how giant everything seems. Discuss that with us a little bit. About 10,000 years ago, a glacier actually buried the Inside Passage. And just like Yosemite, you know, we know the depth and the scale there from being close to it here in California. And it had that same sort of gigantic scale where you have 8,000-foot mountains coming right out of the ocean, and then hundreds of little islands around as well. So sometimes I would look out and you could actually see 20 to 30 miles down Johnson Strait. And I would have to stare at the tips of my shoes and look at my shoulders and back just to remind myself that, yes, indeed, I was there. It was such a giant place that it would tend to swallow you up. You spent a lot of time alone on the island, except for some Indians that would come and visit you. And the Indians weren't sure at first that you would make it. You told a story about one man who said he was going to come and collect your bones in a while. Well, a strange thing happened is that the first winter I went for 67 straight days without seeing another human being. And I hadn't mumbled out loud or talked to the dogs or anything like that. Like you see movies of these old gold prospectors are always, you know, mumbling or singing. And your tongue is like any other muscle. If you don't use it, it atrophies. And so after 2 months of isolation, the Indians hit the beach. I opened the door to say, hi, come in for a cup of coffee. My brain fired the signals, but my tongue sounded like I was drunk. The speech was very slurred. So they came in and they kept hearing me talk, and they figured, God, this college guy's never going to make it. In fact, I had a big box of books that you normally don't have time to read. And Larry Joseph, the chief of the Indians, looked at the books and he said, you college guys are all the same. You have a head full of knowledge, but no wisdom. And you're going to end up burning those books this winter to keep yourself alive. And before he left, he said, I'll be by in the spring to collect your bones. So that was the welcoming committee.
And he actually came by with a big sort of symbolic empty container to do that. So
right, and the Kwakiutl humor is very, very wry. And it was ironic, but 6 weeks later he came by. I had just caught a 60-pound lingcod, and I was slicing a huge fillet off, and his boat came around the island, and first I saw the black bucket. And I said, "Larry, what's the bucket for?" And he said, "I came by to collect your bones, but I see that you made it, eh?" And at that moment I handed him a 25-pound fillet. So then that opened the door. Word spread among the Indians that, hey, the college kid did survive. And so they came by and just opened up a floodgate of information.
Let's look at some slides about the area, and then we'll actually talk about some of the harrowing experiences that you had while you were there, okay?
Great.
Let's see the slide. I think the first one is a totem pole.
Yeah, this is sort of a self-portrait with one of the totem poles in Alert Bay, which was the nearest settlement, Kwakiutl Reservation, about 12 miles away. And the Kwakiutls are world famous for their art, especially with their tall totem poles.
Okay.
And I was fortunate in having a badarka, or a kayak, that was 18 feet long with a sail made out of parachute cloth that was loaned to me by a friend named George Dyson. And this way I could sail or paddle right among the killer whales, and the boat didn't make any noise, so I was able to go right in among the pods.
All right.
And here's a overview shot of the settlement. The main house is in the foreground, and then the other buildings are various shops that Will had. One was a blacksmith shop, and the other was for building boats.
Okay, that's a beautiful shot.
And this is the height of summer in August, and it's sort of the Robin Crusoe picture of the wild man of the woods looking out. And again, you can see about 20 miles down Blackfish Sound there at some of the mountains. And during the wintertime, the sunsets were really spectacular. And this was right out the front window and looking at Elephant Mountain, the big square-top mountain straight ahead. But spectacular sunsets year-round.
Beautiful. It's called Blackfish Sound because blackfish is the Indian word for killer whale. And you had some really interesting encounters, if you will, with killer whales. One where you actually touched one.
Right. Right before I left, I was out in the kayak, and a big female came up about 3 feet off the bow, and the way she rolled under, I could tell she was coming right for the boat. So I pulled in the oar and sat there for, felt like 3 years. You know, my heart was thumping in my ears, and she came up right next to the boat, and I leaned over and touched her behind the dorsal fin. So it was really a magic moment.
A lot of interesting encounters, but with eagles. You had one where you were running along the beach and the eagle was trailing you from the top, and your shadow looked like you had wings. He was so completely right on top of you.
Right, and at first I thought that I had, you know, something in my hair. Maybe I'd cleaned a fish and the eagle was after something, but it was sort of a mystical experience in that he stayed exactly above me and adjusted his wings to sort of match my speed. And I looked down on the sand, and it was as if there were wings coming from my torso. So it was sort of an Icarus experience.
You said that one thing Will told you was it can be a beautiful place, but you have to watch out because the next minute it can try to kill you. And you said the most scary experience you had was one day when you took the boat out, you were going to go over to another island to have someone teach you how to scuba dive, and you got into something you had no idea was going to happen. Tell us about that.
Well, the Inside Passage it seems very calm because there's a lot of islands or buffers around to break up the waves. But the problem is it acts like a wind funnel. As a lot of the big winds come across Canada and then they turn right or go north up the Inside Passage. And the weather can change just minute to minute. So I was out in the dory, I thought, you know, it was a clear, beautiful day. And then all of a sudden I'm riding 12-foot waves in an 80-mile-an-hour gale. And I was out there for about 5 hours, no other boats in sight. And in situations like that, you really don't know what to do, but instinctual knowledge that's sort of buried in our remnant past just emerged. It came forward, and I was able to survive and pull through. Well,
and the motor came off the boat. That was one thing that happened. You had to pull it up inside, and it was still working. I mean, there are all these like miracles that happened to get you alive.
If we had, you know, if we're like cats and have 9 lives, I think I gave up about 5 that day because it was just one, you know, trial after another. You know, getting the engine back on and keeping it alive and all that.
What was it like, really, being there? Were you lonely? Was it hard to not see another person, as you said, for 63 days or something like that? Didn't it get to you at all?
Sometimes it did. I think when I noticed the loneliness is when something so magical happened. When, you know, the whales would roll into the bay, and on moonless nights there would be phosphorescent plankton in the water. just like sparkles or lights that were, there from the plankton. And the whales would actually take turns breaching to see